So why I wrote this book. All right. So you'll hear me referring a lot to diet culture, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that is. But diet culture makes us obsessed with food. It makes us obsessed with our body size, our shape. And those are actually conflicting interests. The collision creates the blame and shame often associated with food and body shape, and it causes a disconnection between kind of our brain and our bodies. With diet culture, it people see eating issues are rooted in character flaws or insecurities, which is not accurate. It's actually a lot of them are rooted in biology, and I'll talk about that. And I wrote this book to help people change the relationship with, when they change the relationship with food, they also change the relationship with themselves. So these are all things that I will address. I wanted to start with a mindful eating exercise, which is why you have a raisin in front of you or a craisin. So if everybody could take your raisin or craisin, I'm going to refer to it as a raisin, put it in your hand. Okay. Imagine you've just come to Earth from a distant planet without such a food. Now, with this food in your hand, you can begin to explore it with all of your senses. Focus on the raisin as if you've never seen anything like it before. Focus on seeing it, scan it, explore every part of it. Turn it around with your fingers. Notice its color. Notice the folds and where the surface reflects light or becomes darker. Now explore the texture, feeling any softness, hardness, coarseness, or smoothness. Take your raisin beneath your nose and carefully notice the smell. Bring it to your ear, roll it around. Does it make any noise? Begin to slowly take it to your mouth, noticing how the arm knows exactly where to go and perhaps becoming aware of your mouth watering. Gently place the raisin in your mouth, on your tongue without biting. Simply explore the sensation of it in your mouth. All right, when you're ready, intentionally bite down on your raisin, maybe noticing how it automatically goes to one side of your mouth versus the other. Also notice the taste it releases. Now I want you to slowly chew your raisin, be aware of the saliva in your mouth and how the object changes in consistency as you chew. When you feel ready to swallow, consciously notice the intention to swallow. Then see if you can notice the sensations of swallowing your raisin, sensing it moving down to your throat and into your esophagus on its way to your stomach. Anyone have any idea why I did this exercise? You can just call it out.
So that when we go to take those snacks, we kind of take our time and appreciate each bite.
Yeah, it's really connecting the brain and the stomach. And so, we refer to that as mindfulness. And when we use it with eating, we refer to that as mindful eating. And so, what I wanted you to do was experience what it's like to really pay attention with all of your senses. Okay. So, when I talk about diet culture, what is diet culture? Anyone hear that term? Is this new or is this a term that you've heard before?
Yeah.
Pretty new? It's a little hard to hear you, but I think that's what you're saying. Does anyone have a thought?
A lot of people are saying it's new.
It's new. Okay. So diet culture has to do with the cultural and societal myths about food, weight, and health. It centers around thinness as the ideal. It labels foods as good foods and bad foods. and it puts the blame on the individual, right? It's your fault if you can't lose weight. And so everyone should be able to be in a small body if only you have willpower. That's what diet culture says. I'm a very anti-diet culture sort of person, and you'll see why. Just as fish living in a world of water do not know that they are wet, it's easy for us to miss the influence that diet culture has over us in our world. So many of these diet culture ways are so ingrained that we don't even realize that they are issues. We're just so used to them. We grew up with them. They're part of our fabric. So diet culture promotes an unrealistic, single ideal body type, right? Like I said, everybody should be in a tiny, tiny body. How unrealistic is that? Right? I want, by a show of hands, how many of you have brown eyes? Okay. How many have blue eyes? Okay. Did you guys choose your eye color? No. All right. How many of you are in taller bodies? How many of you are in shorter bodies? Did you choose your height? How many of you are lefties? I am. How many of you are righties? Did you choose that? No. Well, we don't choose our body size where our body belongs either. And diet culture ignores all that. It just thinks everybody can be in the same size body if only they had the willpower. So people are born with diverse, unique body types. Diet culture ignores the influence of genetics, age, ethnicity, and health on body shapes. Okay? So health is not defined by size or weight. I had a man that I was working with. He was 6'7", 354 pounds, was 68 years old, and not on a single medication. You cannot tell me that that man wasn't healthy. I work with individuals that are in teeny, teeny bodies who have osteoporosis because they're not nourishing their body. They're not healthy. And they're in a small body. So body size does not necessarily dictate health.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So the chart that they have, it's that body, BMI. They have a whole way of doing this, which sounds counter to what you're saying.
That's correct, which is why BMI is being thrown out. Do you know why BMI or how it was designed? It was designed for white males years ago. It was never designed for the entire population. Every single athlete comes out obese when you look at their BMI. Why? They have a lot of muscle mass. Muscle weighs more than fat. They could be as fit as a fiddle, and their BMI is going to say they are their weight is too high. They're switching to something where they're going to now measure the height versus the waist circumference. I'm not thrilled with that either, but that is, just so you know, that's around the pike. That's what's coming. They're throwing out BMI. They're going to this measurement. Again, it's not so accurate. Think of a bodybuilder. They're going to have a large, right? A larger, maybe very muscular throughout their waist area. It's going to be much larger. Right? Women tend to have a smaller waist than a man when they're younger. As women age, our waists get a lot larger. So it's not really going to accomplish what they're hoping for it to accomplish. All right, I am going to show you a little video. Give me 1 second. See if I can. Can you see this?
Yes.
There's a big problem at the center of our research on weight and health. What's the problem? Well, picture a society made up of dogs. Let's say poodles are the bossiest group. They're the ones you see down at the doggy park barking at all the other dogs about how to live their lives in order to be healthy. But the problem is, poodles think that every other kind of dog is just a really big, a really small, or a really fat poodle, when actually the other dogs aren't even poodles at all. They're terriers, or mastiffs, or greyhounds, or labs. And all of the thousands of different dog breeds have different lifespans and different health risks. Each one has evolved to use food differently for different specialties at surviving. Some for staying warm, some for running fast, and some for being strong. They're meant to be different sizes and weights. So the poodles think the mastiff should lose weight, but a starving mastiff never becomes a poodle. The poodles don't understand that dogs come in many more sizes than they can imagine in their poodle-centric ways. So this becomes a problem when it comes to poodle science. When the poodles did their weight and health research and made their claim that lighter dogs are healthier and live longer, they weren't comparing thinner poodles and fatter poodles. They were comparing poodles and mastiffs. So the recommendation for mastiffs to lose weight is based on the false assumption that if all dogs reach poodle weight, then all dogs will have poodle health. But once again, a starved mastiff just isn't a poodle. This poodle science doesn't even test whether a starved mastiff lives longer than a mastiff who has enough to eat, because one would have to compare mastiffs who maintain poodle weight to mastiffs that maintain mastiff weight. And it turns out that starving mastiffs regain weight, which after all is a much better thing than starving. But the poodles can only see that regain as a failure of mastiff self-discipline. Look, poodles are great, but poodle-centric health policy is a nightmare. Good science tells us that it's better to recognize and respect the ways we're different, because how we're treated, having good friends, having access to decent food, a place to play, restful sleep, and medical care make a huge difference in our health and longevity, for all of us, whatever our size.
Okay,
Thank you.
let me get back to, there we go. All right, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so what did you think about that video? Any thoughts?
Yes, it was very good. Very
Make some
good.
slides.
Accurate, yeah, very accurate.
Right? It's sort of what I'm talking about. You can't,
Now
just
get 20% off at Chewy Pharmacy.
hold on.
Some things are even better.
Hold
At
on.
Chewy Pharmacy, you get high quality pet meds at low prices every day.
The dog video.
So you'll have more money to be.
No time, yeah, there we go. Oh, that's a
My
cute picture.
YouTube went into a
Commercial.
sorry. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. Right. And so, you can't compare people with different biologies. And so when I work with people, I try to see where they genetically belong. Somebody who's been at the 75th percentile their entire life belongs at the 75th percentile. They don't belong down at the 50th or the 20th, right? That's where they belong. And so I call that biologically appropriate weight. Like, where does your body belong? As opposed to making everybody fit into one graph. Diet culture promotes that unrealistic single ideal body type, just what we're talking about. It equates thinness with worth, success, and happiness, ignoring other qualities. has unrealistic aspirations, can contribute to shame, low self-esteem, body dissatisfaction. The media perpetuates this standard using photoshopped and narrowly sourced images. How many, I work with a lot of adolescents, and they're following their movie stars on Instagram, and so many of these photos are photoshopped. So and not only are they trying to fit into a body that's not ideal for them, they're trying to fit into a body that actually doesn't exist. And so then they restrict and restrict and restrict to try to lose weight. And what happens when you restrict too much, right? Your body then makes you overeat. So you have this ricochet back and forth. Restriction, binge eating, restriction, binge eating. We see that very often, which is why diets don't work. I'll talk a little bit more about diets. So people are born with diverse and unique body types. Just like I'm saying, body diversity reflects a wide range of healthy weights, shapes, and sizes. Each person's metabolism is unique and determines how their body responds to food. Body diversity is a natural part of evolution and human adaptation, and understanding this diversity can dismantle harmful stereotypes and stigmas and foster self-acceptance and body neutrality. Have you heard the term body neutrality?
No.
So when we talk about body neutrality, it's can we be neutral to those parts of our bodies that we wish were different? Nobody has the perfect body. We all have parts of our body that we wish were different, right? So somebody might say to me, I hate my legs. I hate my legs. And so they try to diet to make those legs smaller. But as they lose weight, they may not be losing it in their legs because biologically, they just might have larger legs. They might be losing it in other places, and then they get frustrated. And so I say you don't have to love every part of your body, but can you accept it? What do your legs do for you? They get you from place to place, right? You can drive a car, you can push the pedal. If you didn't have legs, you wouldn't be able to do that. Or I hate my arms. What do your arms do for you? They hug people, they carry things. What would you do without those arms? Life would be harder. So can you accept that part of your body that you wish were different? Can you be neutral towards it? Diet culture ignores the influence of, we just said that, genetics, age, ethnicity, and health on body shapes. Okay. So health is multifaceted. It includes physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Focusing only on your size creates stigma, which has proven to negatively impact one's mental health. People in smaller bodies can have poor health, while people in larger bodies can be extremely healthy, as the example I gave you with my client. Social connections, sleep, mindfulness are critical to health and are unrelated to size. So my preferred method toward wellness promotes an inclusive, non-weight focused approach. What that means, when someone comes to see me, my goal is not to get as much weight off of them as quickly as I can. My goal is to help them learn to eat in a way that feels good for their body, that gives them energy, that allows them to have the strength to exercise and feel emotionally well. And at the same time, we can make subtle changes towards, if they have, for instance, a medical issue. I'm going to make some changes because I need to address it, but they can be smaller changes. They can be gradual. The idea is to make them permanent, because when we make a huge change, sometimes it's harder to keep. So I do smaller changes and we try to make them permanent, not temporary, which is why so many diets don't work. Diets are really about deprivation. So, and what we know about diets is about 90% of people gain their weight back. right? Which means 10% keep their weight off. So 10%, let's see, if I tell you that airplane you're about to get on has a 10% chance of getting there, are you getting on it? Probably not. And yet people go on diets and off diets and on diets and off diets. And so what we know is that dieting, restrictive dieting, does not work. So a little bit about my book. The purpose of my book was to help people discover a positive, respectful relationship with food as well as with your own body, to help each individual do that, to help people identify the common underlying causes of eating issues, to create and build positive behavior change, and to help empower others to begin to heal and regain joy with their relationship with food. So I'm going to read a little bit of an excerpt. Well, let me first talk about the structure of the book, and then I'll read the excerpt. So part 1 is kind of the why of it all. Part 2 is a quiz. I've made up a quiz that can help people try to be more aware of their eating style. Everyone's got an eating style that comes from our upbringing, genetics, environment, habit, what we do over and over again. Part 3 is strategies and solutions for healing and growth. And part 4, takeaways, tips, and next steps. Okay, so just to kind of expand on that, part 1, help you gain insight into how our biology sets everyone up for an eating issue, basically. If you think back to the caveman days, I wasn't there, you weren't there. However, it probably went something like feast, famine, right? Buffalo came to town, everyone ate. That's a feast. Then it's the dead of winter. Famine, berries, people are scrounging for food. Then again, a buffalo comes to town. People are so over hungry. Your brain is so over hungry that it then overeats. And so you go kind of back and forth like a ping pong ball to restriction, overeating. Now, your brain doesn't know the difference between a true famine and a feast, or whether you're on a diet. That diet is restriction. And then it makes our body overeat, which is why diets don't work. Also, primal humans develop taste for sugar and fats due to their high energy value. So part 2 is the quiz. It narrows down the specific type of eater that you are. You'll select the statements that apply to you and tally them up. Part 3, exercises, worksheets, prompts, affirmations for your specific eater type to find healing and growth. And part 4, next steps, tips towards moving forward, including framing positive self-talk and non-food ideas to self-soothe. So if people use food as a coping mechanism, all right? Many people use food as a coping mechanism, as a way to self-soothe. I can't just take away the food. Then what? Then what do you use, right? So I teach tools and strategies that help people know what to put in place of the food. If you're not going to use food as a way of self-soothing, you have to have another way. So some of the examples, the types of eaters that we have: the sleep-deprived snacker, the procrastinator, the seafood eater. Notice how I spelled sea. It's not the thing that's in the ocean. The clean plate eater, the all or nothing eater, the get it while you can eater. So for example, the clean plate eater, they feel obligated to eat everything on their plate, whether or not they're hungry. There's a well-meaning belief that we should never waste food. So this is problematic because when we're looking at our plate and eating food in response to our plate, we're ignoring our internal fullness cues. For example, think of a baby, right? A baby that is bottle fed. Mom puts the bottle in, baby drinks. Baby's done. Baby spits the bottle out. Mom looks at the bottle and says, oh, wait, there's still 2 ounces. Mom puts the bottle back in. Baby drinks a little more, spits it out. Oh, mom says there's still 1.5 ounces. Mom puts it back in. Mom is overriding this baby's internal fullness cues compared to the baby that's breastfed. Mom puts the baby to the breast. Baby sucks. Baby lets go. Baby's done. That baby's internal fullness cues are being honored. So it actually starts that early in terms of paying attention to internal hunger and fullness cues. I'm going to address that again in a little bit. So with clean plate eating, people are using the plate to help them figure out whether they're full, as opposed to the connection between the brain and their stomach. Now, I'm don't get me wrong, I'm not a believer in wasting food, but I will I have the little glass containers with the tops. I'll save this much from my plate. Literally a tiny, tiny 1.5 ounces of salmon that I have left over. I put it in the fridge. I'll eat it tomorrow. So I'm not saying that people should just, throw away food. However, if you're not hungry, if hunger isn't the problem, food isn't the answer. You're not hungry, need to stop. The all or nothing eater. This is probably one of the most common eaters. Framing eating habits in extremes, judging their eating choices in strictly opposing terms. All right, either you do your diet with 100% perfection or you just bail on it totally, right? There's nothing in between. Either I eat no cookies at all or I eat the box. And actually learning to have a couple of cookies or a couple of what I call fun foods is a skill that you can learn. The sleep deprived snacker. During times when people don't get enough sleep, they tend to eat more than usual to take in extra energy to help their lagging body stay awake. So let's say you were working on a project, you got 4 hours of sleep last night, it's 3 p.m. and you're just dragging. You go down to the candy machine, right? Or get a cup of coffee, something to kind of lift you up. And so actually what your body needs is more sleep, and sleep is a pillar of health. So getting adequate sleep is actually beneficial in terms of allowing our body to eat in a way that feels good to us. The procrastinator uses food as a distraction. To avoid work or a pressing obligation, right? Who wants to sit and pay bills? I much rather sit and have a piece of cake, right? So it's an avoidance. Who wants to do homework? I much rather go have some chips and guacamole. So eating something as a way to put off starting a task or a project they actually don't want to do. They actually want to do, but don't know where to start. Okay, so I have a question. And I want to see if I can see you guys. How do I get back to you? I want to see you. There we go. No? Let's see. Hold on. One of these days I'll become computer savvy. Anyway, can you shout out some foods that are bad for you? What foods are bad for you?
Sugar, processed food,
Fatty, fried.
Deli meats.
Fried foods, sugar, processed foods. Any
Fatty.
other?
Deli meats, alcohol.
Okay. All right. So these are all bad foods, right? Do you want to know this is my example of a bad food. A food that's stale. A food that's moldy. A food that's rotten. What's the difference between my thinking and yours?
Physical state versus mental appreciation.
All foods can fit, right? I'm not saying that it's great to have tons of sugar. I'm not promoting that. But is it okay to have a cookie or a piece of cake or something here and there? Absolutely. But once people label it a bad food, right? Uh-oh, I ate a bad food. So I blew it. Oh, I already blew it. So now I might as well keep going. So it's how we look at the food. If we think of foods as good and bad, we label them. And then that makes it really hard to be able to eat them in a way that doesn't promote guilt or shame. All foods fit unless you have some type of a medical reason. Somebody with diabetes really does need to watch their blood sugar. It's not good for them. Somebody with high cholesterol needs to watch their saturated fat. That's not good for them. However, beyond that, all foods can fit in a well-balanced intake. And so what happens is if we shift the way we think about things, then we shift our actions. If I'm now no longer thinking that that cookie is such a bad thing, and I eat it in a mindful sort of way, how we just did, right? What happens? I get full pleasure from it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So medical issues aside, those are truly the only bad foods because all foods fit. I'm going to read an excerpt now from the All or Nothing Eater. It probably would not come as a great shock to anyone if I were to point out that there is often a connection between eating issues and some level of anxiety. I'm not just referring to major clinical bouts of anxiety. I also refer to those garden variety, nagging sensations that can plague us all from time to time. One of the ways we tend to manage our anxieties is by trying to control as many aspects of our life as we can. The impulse to control often shows up in the form of perfectionism. And perfectionism is a major trigger of all or nothing eating issues because perfectionism and all or nothing eating both tend to have rigid, absolutist thinking at their roots. The all or nothing mindset views eating choices in strictly opposing terms. You either do your diet with complete 100% perfection or you bail on it totally. One of my clients, a mom and middle school teacher named Sally, not her real name, of course, is a prime example of this dynamic. Sally had been struggling with diets since she had her last child 4 years before she came to my office. At her first session, she mentioned an event that had happened the weekend before, which revealed her all or nothing approach to eating. She said, I went out for Sunday brunch with my family, something I had dreaded all week. And they wanted and all ordered croissants. I wanted a croissant too, but I'm not allowed to have that on my diet. So I ordered an egg white omelet with some tomato slices. I ate my food with my mouth, but theirs with my eyes. We went home and I felt so deprived that I began to eat a cookie, which turned into 3, then 8, then the whole box. That's when the buckets came in. I had already ruined my diet, so I might as well eat everything I could find. And so began a large binge. Sally ended up her day feeling defeated once again. This commitment to be perfect or give up is filled with good intention, but faulty thinking. Unless there is some sort of worrisome food or an allergy present that is harmful, say, what's wrong with having, say, half a croissant with some fruit or even a whole one if the alternative leads to an almost debilitating feeling of deprivation? People who struggle with all or nothing eating see restriction as totally good and the inevitable surrender to eating when you can't sustain perfection as totally horrible. As in the case with most people dealing with eating issues, the first step in healing a relationship with food is to stop being afraid of it. One way to stop being afraid of this is to move our relationship with food from our rule-based mind to our intuitive heart. I'm a firm believer in intuitive eating, an important pillar of which is following your internal hunger and fullness cues. With intuitive eating, we don't see restricting food as a good thing in and of itself. And mostly important, an intuitive eater enjoys eating and respects food as a good thing without guilt or misgivings. And my final tip to taking the power out of all or nothing thinking, whether the subject is food or any other aspect of our lives where crippling perfectionism rears its ugly head, is to remember that in most cases, good enough is good enough. So why don't we give ourselves a break, embrace the good enough, and trust our intuition? If we can do that, finding our way around Sunday brunch just may get a bit easier. All right, so that is one of my eaters. There are 15 others. I'd like to turn now to the handout, the hunger and fullness scale handout. Okay, so the hunger and fullness scale is a scale from 1 to 10. 1 is famished, over hungry. You're so over hungry that you would eat your least favorite food. 10, overstuffed. You are so full that you can't move. Those are extremes. The goal is really to stay, if you can, between a 3 and a 7. So if a 1 is famished, a 2 is over hungry, a 3 is comfortably hungry. When our body is comfortably hungry, that's when we need to eat. A 5 is sort of neutral, no longer hungry, not full. And a 7 is comfortably full. Now, many times through dieting, people have lost the connection with their hunger and fullness cues, their internal ones. And so really paying attention to it is so important so that you could figure out what's a 3 in your body, what's a 7 in your body. If you're used to eating to a 9, right? You're used to eating to the point where you're really uncomfortable. Instead of trying for a 7 right away, maybe try for an 8.5 and then try for an 8 and move it down. The more gradually we make changes, usually the easier it is to stick with them. And then at the, what you can write down is at the start of your meal, where are you, right? So in a perfect world, at the start of a meal, you'd be at a 3. Ask yourself midway through, where am I now? In a perfect world, we'd be somewhere around a 5, 6. And then at the end of your meal, where are you? Again, in a perfect world, which we don't live in, we'd always be at a 7, which again, it's normal to sometimes overeat. That's actually part of normal eating. Just so you know, there's no, most of what I say, if you can do it 80% of the time, you're golden. Again, no all or nothing. 80% of the time we eat nourishing foods, 20% there's room for what I call fun foods. At the bottom, I list some alternative activities so that if you know that hunger is not the problem, in other words, you're at a 7, 7.5, 8, but you're still wanting more food. Maybe you had a long day, you're exhausted, you're not wanting to go pay bills or whatever. You can find an activity, which I just labeled some here, but you can find your own. Make a list of activities you enjoy. Go do an activity. Distract yourself. Again, if hunger isn't the problem, food isn't the answer, something else. And so some of these can also be coping mechanisms, right? Meditation can be a coping mechanism, going for a walk, coping mechanism, journaling. That's a way to deal with our feelings in a very positive way. So instead of using food, we write down our feelings. All right. Any questions?
What about the desire after you eat a meal to have something sweet?
Hold on one second.
The very common comments and feeling that people have, including.
Hold on. Let me try to get rid of this. Okay. I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
What about the feeling and the desire that after a meal, people are looking for something sweet?
Okay. Good question. That is a habit. We weren't born, right? When you were an 18-month-old, did you say, "Oh, I need to have something sweet after this meal"? It's a habit. So what do we do with habits? We very slowly try to make little changes. In other words, can you one evening, if it's, let's say it's after dinner, one evening, can you not have it? One time this week, can you not do it? Maybe have an activity plan that you really enjoy. I love playing Mahjong online on my iPad. That would be a fun thing for me to do, right? So if I were trying to not have something sweet after dinner, I might have my dinner to the point where I'm comfortably full and satisfied, and then go play Mahjong on my iPad, right? Can I get through one evening? If I get through one evening, maybe next week I can do it twice, right? And then you decide. So the need to have something sweet is a habit. The choice to have something sweet is yours. You can choose to do it. You can also choose not to. Any other questions?
What about the evening, late night snacking when you absolutely don't need it? And I have a teapot sitting out on the counter to distract me, but I don't do it.
Again, can you one day this week, not do it? In other words, set up something for yourself, set up something fun. Also, make sure you've had enough dinner. And it depends what time we're eating dinner and what time we're going to sleep. If we're eating enough food, especially protein keeps us full for about 3 hours. If we're eating enough food, then we should be able to go about 3 hours without eating. If we're eating enough, and if we have enough protein, that kind of keeps us full, we should be able to go about 3 hours. And so I advocate for eating about every 3 hours. In other words, if I'm having breakfast at 9, I'll have lunch around noon. I'll have a snack around 3, dinner around 6:30. I may or may not have an evening snack depending on when I'm going to sleep. If I'm going to sleep 9:30, I may not need it. If I'm going to sleep at midnight, I may need it. I'm basing it on my hunger, not on my habits.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I always like sweets, but not to the point of the ridiculous. And I found that the last few years of my life, I've become a real addict, and I'm not giving myself that name. I am. I mean, it's like.
You know what? You're going in and out a little for me. I'm so sorry. I'm having a hard time. Say it again.
Louder.
I have become a sugar addict. I cannot eat just one. And I believe it is when I start to get nervous about something, then I really notice it. So what can I do?
So there's a perfect example of using food as a coping mechanism, right? You said to me, when I start to get nervous, I know that I need sugar, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's become your coping mechanism. If we're going to take that away as your coping mechanism, we have to put something in its place. You've got to figure out a different coping mechanism that gives at least, it may not give quite as much of the relief. See, food actually brings down anxiety. Sweets and things like that bring down our anxiety, which is why people do it. But if we're going to ask you not to use food, We got to give you something else in its place. So, do you like to journal? Do you like to play? Do you know how to play Mahjong or Canasta? Can you play it online? Can you phone a friend? Can you do an adult coloring book? Knitting. Knitting is a great way to bring down anxiety. We're trying to find other ways to bring down your anxiety so that you don't need to use food. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do everything you mentioned except knit. And it still doesn't seem, for me, it just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to work.
Can you one time not do it?
Yes,
Okay, try that. Try it one time. Because if you can do it, not do it one time, you can not do it more than one time.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm like in the same boat as she is, and I feel like I'm an addict too. But I don't seek out the food. If it's there, I'll eat it. Like if I'm walking into my kitchen and there's a plate of brownies because my very thin and fit husband needs to have brownies on the counter. I'm not really hungry for a brownie, but it's there, so I'm gonna eat it.
Right.
That's how I am with, if it's there, I eat it. I don't seek it out and I don't eat it because I'm hungry. So
Yes.
I don't know, it's a self-control thing. So, no.
You're a seafood eater, SEE dash food, right? You see the food. Yes, because, okay, if you think of your brain as having two separate parts, it's not exactly true, but if you think of your brain as having two separate parts, an emotional side and a thinking side, when the emotional side takes over, the thinking side doesn't work very well. Right? Think of a situation where you might have gotten hysterical. There was an emergency, right? And you just weren't thinking clearly. So that happens. So when emotions are high, thinking goes down. What I would like you to do is really try to stay in touch with your thinking. In other words, you walk in, you see the brownies there, and you think to yourself, boy, those look really good. Wait, am I hungry right now? Where am I on a hunger fullness scale? Oh, I'm at a 6. I'm really not hungry. Maybe I'll have it later. So if you think about fresh made brownies, right? Somebody comes in the room right after Thanksgiving dinner. You've just had this huge meal. You are so full. And they come in with fresh brownies and you eat one. Are you really going to enjoy it to the same degree that if you eat that brownie when you're at a 6.5 or 7, right? You have some room. It tastes better. So save it for a time where you can really enjoy it. If you're not hungry, you're probably not going to enjoy it as much as if you have a little bit of room. I'm not saying you want to be starving and have fun foods to fill you up. You fill yourself up with nourishing foods, but the fun foods can come after. Did I answer your question? Any
I
other?
have a question. You talked about genetic body type, but I've noticed that for myself and maybe other people, I had a genetic body type till I was about 60. And then it got much bigger and fuller. And I don't know whether that's a normal kind of change or that's overeating. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
Sure. So a lot of it has to do with hormones. Think of a 10-year-old's body, pretty straight, right? Female, 10-year-old female, very straight. Think of a 14-year-old female, pretty curvy, right? Biologically, we widen through the hips for childbirth. Do we need wide hips when we're 60 or through menopause? No. Our body starts to go back to this. The other thing about it is people live longer. They've done studies. People live longer when they have a little bit of a cushion. And so biologically, our body makes us put on a little bit of weight through menopause. Like people that live through their 80s and 90s go into those years slightly larger because every time they get sick or have something, they lose a little. If they go into their 80s and 90s without a cushion, they tend to not live as long. Many people die actually of malnourishment. Their body is not nourished. So there is a biological reason. One of my clients came in, she said, look at this, look at my spare tire. And I said, no, that's actually your life preserver. That is what's going to take you in your years. Yes. Yes.
Can you speak to the growing impotence of Ozempic and the GLP-1 medications?
Yeah, absolutely.
In many instances, we all know diets don't work. And I've been watching TV in the last month or two, and I've been seeing commercials, as we usually do, for Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers and all that. And they've now changed their commercial to including diet plus GLP-1s.
Yes. Yeah. Well, a lot of things are driven by our pharmaceutical companies. However, having said that, there are some people for whom it's almost like a miracle, right? Because they're in such a large body that they have so many health issues, diabetes primarily. That's why it was designed to help with diabetes. It makes the pancreas produce more insulin to keep the blood sugar level down. And so people who are diabetic, people, who really, there's some pretty significant side effects that people get from diabetes that's uncontrolled. So this helped them control, right? As a result, they were losing weight. That also helped bring down their cholesterol, etc. So for certain people, I think it's actually a really useful thing. I will tell you, I had a client come to me whose best friend had just gone on Ozempic. Why? Because she weighed 108 and wanted to weigh 105. And her doctor gave it to her. That's unethical, right? It does have side effects. So for some people, it can be really beneficial. It has its side effects. So like everything, you have to weigh the pros and cons. The problem being, it quiets down the food noise. So that's really helpful. People lose a lot of weight, but they're not learning how to listen to their body. So I have clients who I'm working with who really their goal is to come off of their GLP-1. So I'm really working with them. Right before I got on, I had a client who said, I had one Milano cookie. And I said, well, how did it taste? I'm really getting her to try to really focus on what I did with you with the raisin. How did it taste? Was there pleasure? Was there enjoyment? Because the medication is allowing her to have one or two. Prior to the medication, she could not. So I really want to teach her how to be able to have a little bit so that when she does come off the medication, she'll be able to do that and find some success. Right now, the evidence is showing us that when you come off, you gain the weight back. And so they're toying with, suppose you come off slowly, suppose you do it differently. I think it needs more long-term testing. But did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So does that mean you don't think it will be great long-term, or you're not sure? Well, I guess no one's sure, but.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, what do you think about the long-term effects?
Of the GLPs? I think that they don't know enough yet. I mean, they have been used for a while, so they'll tell you that there's long-term, but they haven't been used in this way. Like, so many people are now losing it solely to lose weight. They're not using it because they're diabetic. They're not using it for that reason. And so I don't think there's enough, they'll tell you, oh, we've researched it, it's safe, whatever. I don't know. It does have side effects. So like any medication, you weigh the pros and cons.
What are some of the side effects?
It's got a lot of GI effects. So nausea, some of those. I don't know the full list of side effects. I know that that's one of the primary ones.
Mm-hmm.
And where they take the injection seems to impact how they feel as well. So
I know a lot of people who have taken it to lose 10 or 15 pounds. Some small amount, and then they say, and I'll be on it for life at a maintenance dose.
That's right.
I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, right now it seems that I have a client who went off it because she had a change in her insurance and she couldn't get it, and she gained 15 pounds in a month. So, yeah, I don't know. But it gives people an opportunity to really, underneath it all is people have to change their relationship with food. If food is the place that people go for emotions, then there's no diet that's going to work. There's no, and maybe, the GLPs will because it quiets the food noise, but that's artificial. If you really want to, you have to change your relationship with food. You have to change the way you think about it. Like I said, can't be all or nothing, can't be good or bad. It's all food. All foods are made up of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. That's all we have. They have different amounts of proteins, carbs, fats, but that's what foods are made up of. No good, no bad. Proteins, carbs, and fats. So a lot of it is a choice. If I choose to only eat cookies all day long, am I nourishing my body? No. So if 80% of the time I can eat nourishing foods, there is room to have what I call fun foods. And that way we can have smaller amounts. We're satisfied. We've eaten, right? We're not hungry, but it's a fun food. So.
Anybody else have any questions?
Do people use
Louder.
Do many people use fun foods as rewards?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people use fun foods as rewards. I always encourage people to find a reward that's not food-based. So, for me, I finish paying my bills early. I get to do my canasta online, so that's what works for me. That motivates me. Food is not a reward.
But people who binge on sweets sometimes are conscious of it not being so healthy, so they eat a normal, well-balanced meal, and then they give themselves permission to binge on fun foods. Do you find that that's something that some of your patients do? They know that they should eat normally. I know I will eat the right things, and then I give myself permission to have whatever I want. But I make sure I eat the right things first.
Mm-hmm. So again, it's your choice. If you're going to do that after every meal, you may not meet your nutrition goals or, goals for your body. If you're going to do that 3 times a week, might be just fine. Right? Once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever you decide. A lot of this is choice, right? So we do get to choose when we want to have things, if we want to have things. That is our choice. I know sometimes people don't feel like it's a choice because it's so ingrained in kind of in habit, but it really is a choice. Whether I have ice cream tonight or whether I have a cookie or whether I don't, whether I skip it today, have it tomorrow. That's my choice. And there's an empowerment that comes along with that. I feel empowered when I nourish my body, right? That's empowering. Also, portion sizes are important, right? Who doesn't love ice cream sometimes, right? I don't think I have ever gone into an ice cream shop and gotten larger than a kitty size.
Sure.
That's what I get. I get a kitty size, and I really enjoy it. And even if they don't tell you that they offer it because they want you to get bigger, they offer it. Almost everyone has a kitty size. So portion sizes are really important as well.
Do you put your patients on, do you put your patients on a food plan, a diet that really, so that they learn how to see the effect on the body, or do you just tell them to be conscious of what they're eating? Do you give them guidance as to what to eat?
So the clients I work with, and I work with people in California. So I have worked with people all over. I'm licensed in California. I do for each person what they need. So if somebody doesn't know how to eat in a helpful sort of way, I might give them more of a structured plan. If somebody knows the basics of proper nutrition, but they're just having trouble, making choices, I might do some sample meals for them so that they know what a meal looks like. Sometimes I use what's called the plate method. I take a plate and show them what should be on the plate and how much of it. Right? So for some people, like a quarter protein, a quarter starch, and the other half of their plate, maybe salad, vegetables, maybe some avocado and some nuts. So I teach people, how to make that plate and what it looks like. Meal planning, meal prep, things like that are all important to learn. But you'll notice that none of these rely on restriction. Because once you start restricting, it just makes your brain want to overeat. So.
And by restriction, you mean telling yourself zero. Having a small portion is not restriction, if I'm hearing you right.
Correct. Having a small portion, I call choosing. You're choosing it. Restricting is I'm starving. Oh, but I can't eat because I'm trying to lose weight. That's restricting. And your brain knows the difference. Your brain knows when you're restricting, and then it makes you overeat. We're wired for survival.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, this was extremely informative, and it was a pleasure hearing from you. And I also want to comment that this hunger and fullness scale is a really nice concrete way of evaluating yourself. I've never had anything like this, and I've seen a lot of stuff like, about diets and restriction, and this is really very helpful, so thank you. And
well, it brings awareness. It makes you think. It makes you think. If you take nothing else from this, I want you to think about the times when you go on your emotional brain, which is reacting, or go on your thinking brain, which is responding. So we do that in several places in life, right? Talking to people, communicating, someone triggers you, whatever. We do it with food as well. So when we're using our emotional brain, we're reacting. When we're using our thinking brain, we're responding. There's a difference.
Thank